Hey there, Tiffany here, and welcome to day 2 of my 31 days of Halloween. Now, in this second day of my 31 days of Halloween, I will be reading one of the stories from Christine Soltis's book, her anthology book, Estranged Decisions. Now, I will say I do have permission from the author to share this story, and I will also leave a link to my full review of the anthology that I did a couple of weeks ago, and I'll also be leaving a link to where you could purchase the book if you're interested in that. So, all right, but the book, the story, the story I will be reading is one of my favorites in the book. It's Amery's Magic Services, and I really like this story. It's kind of like one of those choose the path you take in life wisely, and sometimes things are not always as they seem. So sit back, grab a beverage, and enjoy this spooky story. A mural of 2 large hands holding a small crystal ball graced the side of a dilapidated building. However precise the artist tried to be with this design, mostly it just ended up looking cartoonish. Bridget Shepherd looked around her. Crunched together buildings were barely spaced apart. The area lent a somber gray look, an unspoken sorrow that predicted the final, future demise of an already dead-end town. Bridget studied the painted sign, her eyes drifting along to the shady human characters that lingered nearby, hauntingly lining the street. To make sure she was in the right place, she looked back at the business card in her hand. Amery's Magic Services. The name on the card matched the aged and withered lettering above the mural. If this guy was so good, why didn't he get a new sign? Maybe one of those bright neon ones you see on shady streets surrounded by tattoo artists and strip clubs. You know, it would be fitting on a street like this. At least that was her impression. It's not like she didn't know what that lifestyle was like. She looked back at the card. Underneath the name of his business were the words, "Choose your fate." Suddenly, her ears perked up, catching the sound of feet stumbling across the uneven, broken cement sidewalk. Her eyes followed the sound off to her right. Immediately, she was alerted by 2 men in black trench coats that had started walking briskly towards her. Easy target. That's what they were thinking. Her fear that they might carry her away forced her to place a hand upon the cold door handle in front of her and pull. Jing, jingle, jing. Bells clattered against the door, warning the occupants of her approach. She looked out to the streets, at the 2 discouraged faces of the men whose pace now slowed. She turned forward, preparing to shut the door behind her, but instead jumped in alarm, in reaction to the larger man who stood in front of her. A shadow fell across part of his face. The other half wore rectangular, ruler-straight orange streaks from the street-light illumination. His brown flesh seemed to darken more with the shadows. Squinting eyes stared down at her from a face defined by thick, hardened lines, emphasizing the appearance of a life that was never easy. Internally, she questioned his nationality. Was he Cuban, Mexican, perhaps even Native American? She stiffened and gulped in fear at the size of his towering frame. The door was still parted slightly behind her. She could leave, There was still time to flee. But would the men on the street capture her instead? To her relief, the huge man realized his invasion of space and stepped back into the room, waving her forward with one thick arm. The terror in her eyes probably convinced him she was no threat. Bridget shut the door behind her, leaving all possibility of escape with it. She could not turn back away now. Now she had to go through with this. She blinked hard, closed her eyes, and took a deep breath. Just as she breathed it out, Bridget pushed herself forward in the direction the man's arms guided her. She walked forward, entering through a long, dark hallway, leading off towards the only room that seemed to have any light. The shadows of darkness covered everything in her path. With the exception of a few illuminated jars, compacted with things she couldn't recognize, she didn't even want to think of. She focused on the other glowing items in the dark. There were gems and stones that glowed with colors, just like a nightlight, along with glowing flowers, crosses, and other neon signs. Although fascinated, she was certain she didn't want to know the story behind their magic. Instead of being distracted by these neon illuminations, she tried to focus straight on her dark forward path. Chills ran down her body, focusing on her spine and causing hairs to raise everywhere. Fear pulsed with claustrophobic panic inside of her as she thought only of escape. Should she turn back now and run? Magic? What made her think to turn to magic? She must have become just that desperate. Seemingly, against her volition, her eyes kept being drawn to the bright neon objects in the darkness. She looked to her right, suddenly at eye level, with two bright green eyes staring into her face. She jumped and screeched in unison, "Ah!" Then the eyes disappeared, leading the cat that jumped off the shelf somewhere else to hide. Behind her there was a laugh. "He won't hurt you," he chuckled. The towering man had one of those voices that with thick growling but low at the same time, a mass of contradictions. Bridget swallowed hard and focused on the path again. Her eyes no longer veered away from the direction of her footfalls. The light was closer now as she hurried inside a dimly lit but much more illuminated room. Inside there were two chairs, one at each end of a wooden table. A colorful cloth covered the table, an unexpected cliché for this type of place. It was everything she imagined from a magic shop, except there were no beads hanging in the doorway. She moved to the side of the doorway, allowing Amery to pass in front of her. Bridget looked around, noticing that there was absolutely nothing on the walls. The room was barren, with the exception of the table and chairs. Without any distractions to look at, Bridget watched Amery now. The big man bent down to retrieve something from under the table. He looked so large next to the table. When he brought his hand back up, he was holding something that was wrapped up in a black, white, and gray blanket. He held it cupped in the palm of one hand. As he began to unwrap it, she saw it was a circular shape. Was it a crystal ball? Once he fully unwrapped it, she knew for certain, however, the crystal ball was not clear, see-through glass. Instead, it had an obviously thick gray cloudiness to it, The big man set the wrapping blanket aside and held the ball in his two large hands. The big man's face softened as he looked at her. Before she could imagine it, he spoke. "Just like the mural outside," Amery laughed. Bridget began to smile, but only half-heartedly. Amery could see that her sorrow was deep. His smile turned into a frown. That was just how it always was with his clients. They only came to him when desperation took over. His voice grew serious now. "How old are you?" he asked. 28, she replied. Her voice was cold and coarse, croaking out of her like a frog in a summer pond. Amery looked her over. Sternness replaced his mirth. "Are you certain about why you have come here today?" he asked. Bridget shook her head. "No." Amery nodded with understanding. "They never are," he replied. He perambulated towards the doorway, but instead changed his path and veered towards her. He held the crystal ball out to her. He looked at it. She looked at it dumbly before reaching out a finger to touch the cold, glassy texture. The hard coldness of it made her quiver. Her finger lingered there for a moment before the ball suddenly sparked to life with blue electric pulses. She jumped back and screeched, despite the fact that it did not electrify her. It was the change of color that was frightening. Amery turned away from her and walked slowly back towards the table with the crystal. "What brings you here?" he asked. Her voice was solemn now, gameless. "I was told about the two lives," she said. Amery raised an eyebrow. He turned towards her with the crystal ball still in his hand. "But you are still young. Are you sure about this?" he asked. She bit her lip and then nodded unconvincingly. "Yes." He looked at her with scolding in his eyes. "Two lives cannot be undone. Are you brave enough to live with your choice?" he asked. She nodded again. "Yes," she said. Amery studied her even closer now. "You must be certain before we begin. Again, you know this cannot be undone. Many have made the wrong choice in the two lives. In fact, most have chosen wrong. Regret is all that followed them when they walked out that door." His voice softened as he continued, "And they have had to live with it." She nodded again, her nostrils flaring with controlled defiance. "I leave nothing behind if my choice is wrong." She took a thick tan envelope from the inside of her jean jacket pocket and set it out on the table before pushing it towards him. "This is my payment," she said. Amery nodded then, but he did not count the money or even look into the envelope. Instead, he just simply slid it under the table. The girl's eyes followed him, waiting for his guidance. "Sit down, then we shall begin. You mustn't be afraid. You cannot afford to be as jumpy as you have been. You need your full wits about you at the end," he said. Bridget bit her lip and then nodded. Hurriedly, she took her chair. She anxiously watched him as he took his seat with the crystal ball in hand. He looked across the table at her. "Open your hands as mine are now. You will hold this just as I have done," he said. She nodded and then reached out her own hands. Slowly, gently, he placed the ball between her fingers. Immediately, blue energy sparks crackled the ball to life. Waves started bouncing around inside the walls on a high current. Bridget jumped in reaction, but Amery's look of warning stopped her nervousness in its tracks. Now her hands shook, only slightly, with the ball in them. The crystal brimmed full of energy as it pulled the waves of her aura from her body to study. Her hands began to shake even more as the ball caused tremors between her fingers. "You must be brave," Amery said. Bridget took a deep breath, and her shaking slowed down a bit. The fiery blue flashes continued until it began to draw pictures of her life beginning from her childhood. Mixing with the images, the crystal ball developed audio. Early memories surfaced that she couldn't possibly have remembered on her own. The voice in the memory was perfectly familiar, though haunting her with its clarity. "Now, Bridget, you put that back. Be a good girl. No cookies until after dinner." Featured in the image, a young Bridget was putting the lid back on a cookie jar, with her mother standing in the background. In the present time, a quiet tear instantly fell down Bridget's face at the sound of that voice. Now mixed with the pain, she felt even lonelier than ever. She couldn't recall the memory, but judging from the way they both looked at the image, she guessed she was about 6. The blue light forced the image of their lively faces away, now zigzagging through her past. As the pulses glided in rewind and fast forward, part of her begged to bring back that image, that moment where she had her family. Part of her begged for life to be as it once was, but now it was far too late. The electric pulses stopped, erupting into image scenes again. Now she was at an elementary school. She remembered this one, but in a very blurry way. She was just 8 years old and had made a lot of new friends. They were having fun on the playground at school, but then one of the boys came up behind her. She heard the awful, evil voice speaking the words that had haunted her for so long. "Bridget was adopted. She doesn't have real parents." The youthful argument that ensued thereafter was blotted out. As background noise, by her present mental anguish, a flash of painful recurring sorrow. Another quiet tear struck her cheek. The visual on the ball moved on, landing to her sitting in the living room with her mother and father that same night. "What does adopted mean?" she asked. Her mother and father exchanged glances before her mother spoke. "Adopted means that loving parents take care of a child because other parents couldn't." The little girl looked up at her mother. "Am I adopted?" she asked. Her mother looked at her in the face. "No, honey. You're our daughter, and we love you very much." The image scene disappeared. Flashes of blue developed again, before turning a purplish tint as they circled memory lane. Now a video scene flashed out of her as a teenager. She was shouting angrily and running up the steps of a very familiar home. "I can't believe you didn't tell me I was adopted. I hate you. I hate both of you for lying. Bridget!" A door slammed behind her. Bridget's tears, in present time, made her shake now. The crystal ball's blue and purple lights resumed. Now the blue sparks stopped on the image of a flashing ambulance and police lights. Bridget was stuck behind an accident in a separate car with a few friends. "What is this? What's going on up there?" She recognized the voice. It was Kent's. Bridget had a bad intuitive feeling. She got out of the car and walked away. She could hear her name being called by her friends, but she ignored it. She could tell something wasn't right. Her presentiment became the worst lingering feeling she ever had. She saw the side of a white car ahead of her. An overturned RV had demolished most of it, but the car was familiar. "No," she whispered. Policemen came to her. "Ma'am, you'll have to step back," one said. And she did, but then she saw the two bodies being carried away on the stretcher. Suddenly, her eyes turned to the license plate of the wrecked vehicle. "No," she whispered. "Ma'am," the police officer said. "No!" she shouted. Tears blurred her vision, now just like the rain that started to pour that night. The rain took her adopted family, the only family she ever knew. She had no one else now. No one. Now the ball turned a mixture of blue, purple, red. Amery remained quiet through all of it. Even if her pain affected him, he did not let it show. He was meant to be the objective source. The crystal was the calculator, the life decider of her fates. Now the ball fell upon her search for her real parents. At just 19 years of age, she found them in a rundown neighborhood. On arrival, they nearly shot her straight on sight. It was then that she realized that they were drugged up. They hadn't even given her a chance to explain who she was. "Get off my property," a senile man shouted. And she did get off his property. She left and never returned. The light went blue, purple, red again. The images now aimed at present day. The scene showed her snorting drugs and drinking with her friends. Shame graced her face, flushing her body red. Amery shook his head this time. He didn't like her current path, but that was out of his power. Bridget's tears began to dry as the ball zoomed forward. When it returned to strictly blue light pulses, Amery placed his hand over the top of the ball. His grip stopped it instantly, returning it to its natural gray form. His eyes met hers. "This is the start of what you must decide. You must be careful in your choice. You cannot undo your decision. I can only show you a small piece. The first half of the fates, the two future lives that you must choose from. The second half of your final aftermath will not be revealed until after you have chosen. The crystal makes the decision based on karmic equality. For all karmic doings, one is judged on two different planes of how their future fate should be deserved. Neither choice will be judged as effectively positive or negative, but instead will be what it is. And you cannot trade it in once it is done. Is that clear?" She nodded. "Yes." He took his hand off the crystal ball. The colored indigo lights started fusing together, pulsing and electrocuting themselves. Bridget took a deep breath. Now, a future scene placed itself before her. In it was a sunny day in a peaceful middle-class neighborhood. Bridget was wearing a summer dress full of flowers and sunglasses on top of her head. She had stopped at the mailbox to get the mail. She was going into a house, a small middle-class house, with brown and white trim. Flowers were gathered all around the outside of it. Someone off to the side waved to her. She smiled and waved back before closing the door of the house. Suddenly, the image disappeared, leaving nothing but blackness. Bridget looked up confused. She glimpsed. The glimpse was so short. But Amery was already reaching under the table. This time, he pulled out another wrapped object. This one shaped to a point like a thick spear. Once he unwrapped it, she saw that it wore the same outer gray appearance as the crystal ball. Cloudy, cold grayness composed the material. He reached out one big hand with his palm up. "Give me the crystal ball," he said. Lightly, she placed it onto his large hand. In return, he handed her this thick spear. "Be prepared," he said. The moment she wrapped her hands around the gray spear, it perked to life, flashing the blue, purple, red. As the second fate bringer, it knows to bypass the past, Amery said. Only the future will be seen. Be sure to pay attention. Amery wrapped the blankets around the circular crystal ball to protect it as he waited. Bridget put her full attention on the spear as it began to flash images. Now they saw police arresting her. She was drunk and unruly. In the background was an injured man, an ambulance, and a wrecked vehicle. She had hit someone with her car while under the influence. She gasped. Thankfully, the person had lived. But she was still horrified. Next, the image flashed on as they saw her in prison scrubs, walking a long corridor before turning into the cafeteria. Bridget gasped again, fighting against another deep and horrified breath. The spear turned black. Amery took it out of her hands and sternly looked her over. "Now," he said, "the decision." Bridget was shaking considerably now. She bowed her head, thinking hard about herself before placing her hands over her temples. "Fate, karma wishes me nothing good, I see," she muttered. Amery said nothing. He was never allowed to. The decision was something he must never be a part of. Bridget hesitated a moment longer. "I choose the second life," she said. Amery raised an eyebrow. His eyes looked up from behind his wrinkled forehead. "Are you certain of your choice?" he asked. Fresh tears sprouted from her eyes. "Yes," she said. Amery nodded. "Then we must watch the general outcomes, however short they might be." She nodded and then nervously rubbed her fingers underneath her nose. "Bridget, you have chosen to live the second path your life could take. Your new destiny begins here, formulating with what has been chosen, all of which was calculated based on the karma control of just this lifetime." He handed her the round crystal ball. "We watch the outcome of the first life first, the one you did not choose," he said. Once the ball was in her hands, it immediately flickered to where it left off. The door opened in her middle-class neighborhood. She was about to go inside, but the person behind her interrupted her again. She tried to shoo him away, but he persisted. He came into the scene now. He pushed her inside her home and started into her with his fists. Then there was a gun in her face. She was horrified, crying. "Stop it," Bridget shouted. Her voice echoed both, the present and the unchosen future, sounding out like an audible mirror. The crystal ball was shaken violently in her hands. The video image continued. The gun went off, splattering red against the wall. Her body crumpled to the ground in a heap. The guys searched the house, robbed her, and left. In present time, she panted heavily. The crystal ball went black to signify the end. "Hand that back, please," Amery said. She obeyed, continuing her panting. I don't want to see the other one. This is life. It isn't a game. It shouldn't be a game. We shouldn't be able to manipulate our destiny. I don't believe this is right. She stood up and prepared to leave, but Amery's voice stopped her at the doorway. You have to see it. You cannot leave until you do. Hesitantly, she placed a moment more before she sat back down. He studied her as he handed her the spear this time. It cracked to life, and the image flashed back to her in prison. After dinner in the cafeteria, she was packing to leave the next day. The crystal flashed to her exiting. When she left the tall gated walls, there was no one there to greet her or pick her up. She looked sad and lonely. The spear pulsed forward, continuing her life. A few months later, she met a guy through the Job Corps. They exchanged numbers and became best friends, then lovers. The spear continued to show that years down the road, they owned a nice house and had children who were happily playing outside the large home. The spear turned black. Amery raised an eyebrow and looked at Bridget. She took in a deep breath, seeming uncertain. How did you know which one to choose? Amery asked. So many others choose the wrong path and must powerlessly live it. They try to alter their fate again, but you cannot skip through time more than the one allowance. You are one of the few that have chosen well. How? She took a deep breath, wiped the remaining wetness off her face, and met his eyes. Things are never what they seem. At least they never have been in my life's perspective. The woman in the first one, she wasn't me. She was happy and had so much all on her own, but I've never been there. The way she reacted to the person we couldn't see wasn't like me either. I wouldn't have waved. I shut everyone out that comes near. It just wasn't me. I couldn't see it ever being me. Something in her reaction wasn't right either. I saw it in her face, that I knew something was wrong, that the girl who wasn't me knew that something was wrong. But when I saw the second girl, that second girl, she was in pain and she was lonely and she was broken. And I knew that was me. I knew that was familiar. Amery smiled. Well, congratulations. You have changed your fate. However, you will never know what it could have been in the very first place. And you can never manually change your fate again. There is only one allowance per lifetime. She forced a smile. I'm hoping I'll never have to. I don't need to know my original fate. I couldn't live my life much longer the way it was, without any hope, without any explanation of my path. This was my last chance to live, and now I have a few reasons to, she said. A smile fell upon Amery's large face again. Bridget stood and turned away, stopping at the doorway. Thank you, Amery, she said. You've turned my life around. Thank you, Miss Bridget Lee Shepherd, he said. She stopped abruptly, raising her eyebrow. How did you know my full name? Amery smiled. A real master of science and the magics knows everything before it comes to him, he said. Suddenly she realized he never checked the envelope either. He knew she was coming all along. She nodded at him. Thank you again, she said. Goodbye, Amery said, and good luck. Outside, as Bridget greeted the street, she looked up at the mural and sign once again, realizing just how relevant it was. Well, that was Amery's Magic Services from the book Estranged Decisions by Christine Soltis. And yeah, pretty intense story. However, I do think that it does hold a valuable lesson, definitely, and one that we can all take away, which is, things are never what they seem, and be careful of the path you choose. So I thank you so much for watching, and again, pick up Christine's book, as well as check out some of her other stuff. And thank you so much for watching this day 2 of my 31 days of Halloween, and I will see you in the next video. All right, take care and stay spooky.